Instead of being like, oh, I'm behind, think about the things you've gone through that your peers who you're comparing yourself to, maybe they've not gone through the same thing. You are not behind. You've been through different things. And yeah, maybe society celebrates or prefers their more traditional path, but the stuff that you've learned is still really valuable. You're not behind. I guarantee you there is probably something that someone looks at you and is like, I wish I had that courage. I wish I had that insight. This whole timeline might be made up anyway. Are you really behind, or have you just learnt different things, been on a different journey? Feeling behind in your 20s. Maybe your friend, your peer, someone also in their 20s, maybe you went to school with this person or you work with them, they've just bought a house, they've just booked this amazing holiday that you would never be able to afford, they've secured a salary that's how many times what you earn, got their second degree, or they've got a master's, they've got a PhD. It seems like there are a lot of people, very successful people, doing amazing things. But if you're feeling insecure, feeling sad, wishing that you had the things that they had, but you can't afford it, or you don't have the opportunity at the moment, that can leave you feeling behind and feeling like you need to catch up. My 20s have been quite extreme, and I feel almost like a poster child for feeling behind in your 20s in terms of all of the milestones that a lot of my friends have reached. I have not yet reached, or I reached them many, many years after everybody else. I'm very familiar with this feeling of feeling behind because for a lot of the time I have been, but we're going to go into why that's maybe not such a bad thing and how this whole timeline might be made up anyway. Asking, are you really behind, or have you just learnt different things, been on a different journey? I graduated when I was 26. I did go to university when I was 18. I didn't graduate from that university. I dropped out because of mental health struggles and also an over-reliance on alcohol, which would come to define half of my 20s. I got sober when I was 25. I went to rehab and everything was impacted by my addiction. Friendships, financially, obviously. I was spending a lot of money every day on alcohol. Social skills wise, just life skills, life experiences. Can you see how I would feel behind in my 20s? I'm not earning any kind of salary that would be like someone who graduated when they were 21, or someone like my sister who did an apprenticeship instead of going to university. I don't think it's helpful to compare, but we're defining this feeling of being behind, right? I don't think we can discount as well the impact that the pandemic has had. In 2020, maybe you were 20 and now it's 2024. You feel like you've missed out on some crucial experiences. I still wear a mask because I really value my health after getting sober. I know what it's like to feel terrible every day and not be able to do anything. And also I have family members who it would be very bad for them to get any kind of infection. I still wear a mask everywhere. It's not a big deal. Moving on from all of these reasons why, because it can be depressing and we can be like, oh, I wish things were different, but like what has happened. You're in this situation, you feel this way. Maybe things didn't work out the way you'd hoped, and that's always disappointing. The biggest thing for me in terms of this feeling behind in your 20s, feeling like I'm catching up or I'm not having the same experiences, is that the timeline isn't linear. So we can think of like hitting a series of milestones, like I need to graduate, then I need to earn this much money, then I need to buy a house, then I need to move in with this person, then I need to start a family. Even if you feel behind, you're still moving forward. Obviously, we're moving forward through time, so the timeline is linear, but you're still learning things. You're not just like stuck. And even if you feel like you're stuck, that stuck feeling, you will get to a point where you are able to learn from that in the future. Like I was stuck in my addiction, but now I've been able to go through tremendous growth through facing that and being sober for a while. So even if you feel like you're stuck, sometimes that is part of the process too, and you will learn things from it, maybe just not yet. But if you're aware of it, at least you can be like, okay, I am where I am. What can I do to like support myself through this? You're probably learning lessons now that other people will learn later on. Like the timeline isn't linear. You may be like, I wish I could be carefree and not have to learn these hard lessons now. Again, we are where we are. And I had a therapist at 19. As I said, I was struggling. And this therapist, she said to me, you know what? A lot of the things that you're struggling with, a lot of the questions that you're asking are very similar to what my clients who are in their 40s are asking. And yeah, why was she saying this to me? Is that ethical to be talking to one of your counselees about your other counselees? But she was basically saying like a lot of the things that I was questioning or dealing with, existential questions especially. I've done a whole video about dealing with an existential crisis, so I'll link that for you because I hope that's a helpful resource. I am really proud of that video because I put all of my knowledge and experience and what helped me, I put that into that video. So if you are struggling with these bigger questions, that video might be a helpful starting point. But she was basically saying, you're having a quarter life crisis. These people in their 40s are asking these same questions, having these same doubts or fears, and they're having like a midlife crisis, but you're having a quarter life crisis. So this could be you as well. And I can be thinking, why did this have to happen? Like, why did I have to go through this stuff now? Why couldn't I have just had like a fun time? But you can't choose these things necessarily. Like what happens to you happens to you, and you may have had some awful things happen and you can't control those things and you have to deal with the aftermath. And there's a thing of like the trauma, it's not your fault, but it's your responsibility to heal. And I just want to say, if that quote annoys you like it annoys me, it's okay. Like, yes, you have a responsibility to heal. It helps me to think of it as like, I owe myself that. Like, it's not about getting back at someone or getting back at the world, you know, if something horrible happened. It's about like, no, I owe myself this peace and I want to put this work in to give myself that. Linked to this is that the lessons you learn can help others. Again, it's like, why did I have to learn this? I have gone through quite a lot of things where I feel like I'm the first one of my peers to deal with it. Quite often I can be like, okay, yes, someone has to be the one to deal with this, but like, why does it have to be me? The point is now, I hope that the things that I've been through, I can then bring that into my friendships. When someone is grieving, I always reach out because I know what it's like to be completely alone in that feeling. Even if I'm uncomfortable or I feel like I'm maybe overstepping a line or I'm worried about saying the wrong thing. I've always wanted to do like a whole video around grief, but it is such a complex topic. Even if I'm worried about saying the wrong thing, I'm like, I want this person who's going through this grief to be able to, in a year, even if I say the wrong thing and they feel like a bit affronted. I mean, what can you say? Like, I want them to be able to look back and be like, oh, someone did reach out, like someone did care. They did say something. Maybe at the time they didn't think it was helpful. I want them to know that they're not alone. I hope you know what I mean when I say like, don't say the wrong thing. Expressing condolences or trying to comfort someone who's grieving. We don't want to minimize what's happened. We don't want to overstate our relationship with the person who has died because it's clearly that person, it's their grief to deal with too. There are like all kinds of different things and like expectations, or you don't want to be overly familiar. It's important to say something, even if they're like confused or a bit baffled when you do say something. They might be able to look back and be like, oh, she knew I was going through a difficult time. You know, it will be the thing of like, if you have an older family member who's died, and you know, my mum will think, should I tell my cousin that this thing I saw or this bit of news I heard or whatever, should I tell my cousin that this reminded me of his mum, which is obviously my mum's auntie because they're cousins. But she'll be like, oh, I don't know. It's like very individual and dependent on circumstances. But I'm always with grief. I'm like, it's best to say something. Whatever you have gone through specifically, even if you feel behind now, there will be things that you've learned that other people haven't. You are not behind, you're just on a different timeline. So I went through this difficult process of grieving when I was 16. I didn't really know how to handle it at all, and I felt very alone in that. It was a very bad time for my family, and so we didn't really talk about what happened as a family because it was very difficult for everyone, but I ended up feeling very alone. And obviously I was 16, so all my friends, you know, you're not really equipped to know how to deal with something big like that, especially when everyone is planning what university they're going to go to, planning their career, like super excited about moving to a different city or learning to drive. Like there's so many things, so many possibilities opening up when you're 16, and it literally happened like the week before I started sixth form. So I was still like, I mean, to be honest, I think this process has continued over the years, this grieving process of like coming to terms with what's happened, but it really obviously was having a massive impact in sixth form. I felt really alone in that, and I'm like, now I'm determined, even not just to do with grief, but anytime anything difficult happens, I want to be like one of the first people to be like, hey, are you okay? I'm thinking of you. It doesn't have to be grief, but I'm like, I never want anyone to feel alone. And I know obviously I'm not perfect with this, but that's like my intention. And I like to think that I can use my experience for something good. You're not behind, you're just learning different lessons, and some of the lessons you're learning may be very difficult, but they will be able to help the people around you. And I think they help you as well become a better person, either becoming more introspective or more empathetic. There is something there, and that links to the next point, which is that no time is wasted. So I spent years drunk, literally, and it's very easy to be like, I wasted that time. Or maybe if you're struggling in your 20s, you're feeling behind, maybe you didn't know what you wanted to do at university, or you didn't know what career to pursue, and so you took time out, or you were working in one job and realized you didn't want to do that and you completely had to pivot to something different. It can feel like a waste of time, because you can look at other people and be like, this person knew they wanted to be a doctor, they've become a doctor, they've been a doctor for 5 years, and I've done this for 5 years, but now I'm deciding I wanted to do a completely different thing. You can be like, did I just waste all that time while this person is being a doctor? I know comparison isn't a good thing, and especially if we're talking about like different timelines, we're all learning different lessons, so it's not good to compare. But I certainly know that feeling of like, oh my gosh, wasted time, because literally I was wasted. Like I can look back and be like, oh, I was learning the importance of reaching out. I wasn't reaching out for help, but looking back, I'm like, yeah, I could have made my life a lot easier if I'd maybe put my pride aside. And that's not to like beat up your past self, but also like you can use that confusion about your career or that time you felt like you wasted, use that going forward and learn from it. So like I learned through that difficult time in my like early mid-20s, I learnt that I want to help other people, especially I want to help other people who struggle with the same illness as me. I want to help them get sober. So you can find your purpose from your darkest moments. No time is wasted. I will also add though that you don't have to suffer to learn these lessons. I know a lot of people think you have to go through bad things. It's the same thing as being like creativity inspired by depression or whatever. Like the most creative people, they're also the most sad or like the most complicated. It's like, no, I'm not creative when I'm feeling depressed. It doesn't work like that. And similarly, I don't think you have to go through bad things in order to learn all this stuff, but you can use what you've gone through and learn from it and turn something bad into something positive or helpful or hopeful. The next point I wanted to bring up is about your mindset. This is mainly about using the word behind in terms of I'm feeling behind, or I am like behind everyone else. I can't compete with them, or they're so far ahead of me. This mindset of like positioning other people further along the path, or you running to catch up. In some contexts, maybe it's true, but if you switch your mindset and stop being like, oh, I'm so behind, and instead think about the things you've been through, the things that have shaped you, or the lessons you've learned. Maybe you've learned a lot from traveling that other people your age who haven't done that traveling, they've not learned that. Or you've learned a lot through switching your career. And again, other people who've just been a doctor the whole time, yeah, they will have learned their own lessons, but you've learned your lessons and they can't have learned that because they've not had the same experiences that you've had. Also, trying to flip things. So yeah, I've been through a lot of dark things and I feel like I've wasted a lot of time. But that time brings into focus now the things that are even more important to me. So now I don't take my health for granted because I know what it's like to be physically, emotionally, spiritually close to death, literally. I don't take my health for granted. I'm grateful when I wake up and I'm sober. I'm grateful to be clear-headed and present. I have purpose. I have my health. I have joy. These things were impossible before. I can focus on the good, and when I focus on the good grows. And if I focus on the bad, what I don't have, or this idea of being behind and everyone else being miles ahead of me, if I focus on the lack, that grows too. I can choose to focus on the good, on the things I've learned, and on how I can help other people. So this is not like your mindset will completely reset things, or like it's your fault. No, that is not what I'm saying. I'm just saying there are little shifts that we can make, or at least becoming aware of the language that we're using in terms of, are you behind, or have you just been thrown into a completely different set of life experiences that have taken you on a specific path that you had no control over? You're not behind, you're just like literally on a different path. You're not even on the same one as that person who's went to school, became a doctor, got married, and is now like buying their own house. You're not on that path. You're not even on the same road to them. Like, you can't compare yourself to them. And I think it can be fun if we flip this for a sec, and if you stop thinking about how you're behind and instead think that they are, so that you're ahead of them. This is just like a thought experiment. And think about the things that you've gone through that some of these other people you're comparing yourself to and feeling behind in comparison. Think about the things that you've gone through that they haven't. So if you've gone through emotional things, we talked about grief or different mental health crisis or chronic illness. You've gone through these things, and everyone struggles with different things. It's not to say that that person who has their career and their job and their marriage and whatever, that's not to say they don't struggle with things, but everyone struggles to different degrees. And you have learned valuable lessons through your struggles. And you may have noticed when you try and have a conversation with these people, certain topics make them quite uncomfortable because they've never actually dealt with anything that difficult before. And again, stressing, everyone has their own things to deal with, but we can't compare those things. They're not all on the same level. It's a bit like the saying, we're all in the same boat, but we're not. It's not like everyone has the same mental health struggles to deal with, or the same financial struggles to deal with, or the same struggles with illness or with their health. Everyone has things that they struggle with, but they're not all the same. We're not all in the same boat. We're in the same storm. The storm is terrible. Life is, there are lots of bad things happening. There's lots of good as well. We're not discounting that, but the storm is a lot. And if you're in a lifeboat, you're going to feel the waves, and the storm is going to be more traumatizing, more difficult for you to deal with. It's going to be a lot more difficult for you in that little lifeboat than it is for someone who's on a massive cruise. They may still have things that they're dealing with and struggling with, but they're a lot better equipped. And in this little analogy, the boat can represent like people's money. So maybe they are better financially prepared to deal with a certain thing, their job, their mental health, their family support, where they live, all of these things, they are better supported than you are. You're both in the same storm, but you're not in the same boat. Think about the things you've gone through. So like, I've gone to rehab. I have learned to deal with uncomfortable feelings. I can face uncomfortable truths. I can look reality in the face. I have learned just how important my health is and how easily that can be taken away. And I've witnessed that with other people that I know as well. I can face up to denial. I'm direct. I've grown my confidence. I'm sober. All of these things are really hard earned through the stuff I've gone through. They're tremendous learning experiences, but I've done it. So think about what struggles you have come through and be proud of yourself for it, but also flip it. And instead of being like, oh, I'm behind, think about the things you've gone through that your peers who you're comparing yourself to, maybe they've not gone through the same thing. And I'm not really talking here about people online because we don't know people's experiences, but like if you've grown up with someone or if you're, friends with someone at work or whatever, again, you may not know the full extent of what's happening in their life, but you might have quite a bit of context. You've had a conversation with this person, you've seen how uncomfortable they get when someone starts talking about grief, or you've seen how they don't really know what to say when someone starts talking about their mental health because they have no context or no experience of that, right? These kind of people. I'm not trying to be like, oh, you're so much better than them because you've been through this, but I'm just trying to show that you are not behind. You've been through different things and you've learned different lessons and you have different strengths. And yeah, maybe society celebrates or like prefers their more traditional path, but like the stuff that you've learned or the stuff that you've been through is still really valuable. You're not behind. Maybe emotionally you're way more aware than some of these other people. It's just to do with what society celebrates or what people think is normal. A really interesting book on this actually is Convenience Store Woman. This woman, she feels like she needs to be normal and she feels like she's not perceived as normal. So she asks someone at the store she works in, the convenience store, she asks this guy to be her boyfriend just so that she can say to her family and her friends, this is my boyfriend, because they keep asking and they think there's something wrong with her. This is just one part to the story, by the way. And she's on the phone to her sister and she's like, oh yes, I have this boyfriend. Her sister doesn't ask any questions and it's just like, oh my gosh, like I'm so happy for you. That's so great. The protagonist, convenience store woman, is like, I found it really strange that she was so happy for me and she didn't even know anything about this person. And in reality, the guy as well is like a really horrible character. And it's just interesting how we all want everyone else to be normal and to like normalize our own choices. A really good book, and it's probably only like 150 pages long. It's not very long, but it's really thought-provoking. This idea of like feeling normal or like following this traditional path really fits in with this discussion. So I thought I'd put that out there. Maybe you are not on like the normal traditional path. You're not alone. It's just that we can feel like we're not good enough or we feel like we're behind, but this is not reality at all. Getting there is an illusion and everyone is still figuring things out, even if it looks like they have it all together. So you feel like you're behind, but everyone else, even if they have the things that you think would make you feel like, oh, I'm on top of things here, even if you had those things, you would still be like, oh, I don't feel like I'm a proper adult, or like, I don't feel like I've got it together. Even if you had the things that you're looking at someone else and being like, I'm behind because I don't have that. Everyone is still figuring it out. There will always be more as well. Maybe this is just because I mentioned like I have addiction, so that's the disease of more, and it's very easy to be like, if I had that, I'll be happy. The art is to always be in the present and be grateful for what you have now, instead of constantly being like, when I get to this point, whether it's like when I've saved this much money, or when I'm able to take this holiday, or when I have this circle of friends, or when this, always like projecting into the future, like, oh, when I have that thing. It's the arrival fallacy of thinking, when I get there, then I'll be happy, or when I have that, then it'll be sorted. But in reality, even these people you look at and you're like, oh, I'm so behind compared to them, they probably still have things to deal with too. And this idea of feeling behind or like catching up with people, it will always exist. Even if your current situation resolved itself and you were like, oh, now I'm in the place I want to be, it's then going to be replaced with other things like, oh, I wish I could travel to that place, or oh, I wish I had a house that looked like this, or I wish I had that car, or I wish I had this thing like them. There will always be something. The antidote to that is to keep it in the moment and to enjoy the moment. Getting there, or finally being ahead or not being behind, is all an illusion. And if you're working on yourself or becoming aware of these things, I don't think you're behind at all. We all just have different things to deal with, and maybe you've been dealt a certain deck of cards that means that you've had to deal with things more quickly than other people. You've had to deal with different events happening. You know, I spoke to someone last year who had never been through any grief, and they were 32, not even like a grandparent or a family member. I was like, 32, wow, I had to start figuring this out when I was 16. I don't know if you could detect there. It can bring out some bitterness in me because I'm like, what happened was awful. I wish it didn't happen. So then it's about like giving people grace and being like, okay, no wonder she's dealing with this in this way. She's 32 and she's never been through any grief before. What I'm saying is everyone has a very different set of experiences, and as much as you're feeling behind, I guarantee you there is probably something that someone looks at you and is like, I wish I had that courage, or I wish I had that insight, or I wish I had that resilience. There is the thing as well of like, I don't want to be resilient. Like, I want to be soft. I don't want to have to be constantly being strong. I don't want people being like, you're so strong, you can do it. I'm tired of that. We can't control like what experiences we go through or what happens to us all the time. Try and take solace in the things that you have been through and the fact that you have got through them. You've lived through 100% of your bad days. You've got through all of them. But I know it is really difficult. I hope this video has helped you in some way, at least maybe show you you're not alone and helps give you a different perspective or see things a bit differently. It is a difficult topic, so maybe that's why I've been hesitant to make this video, but if it helps one person, then it will have been worth making. I will leave my existential crisis video on the screen because I mentioned that earlier, and I will also let the YouTube algorithm pick a video from my channel that it thinks you'll enjoy. Please check those out if you would like. God bless. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.